Yeah, we are out here working on the old 8N again. Got a little play in the steering. And I went in the other day because I knew the sector shaft seals were leaking. So I pulled the control arms off, pulled the sector shafts out, put new seals in here, adjusted everything, new O-rings, everything you needed in that. And I still had the play in the steering. And then when we were messing with it, my son noticed, I don't know if you can see with the sun, but the play is the steering shaft moving up and down. So that means I probably got a bad top bearing where the shaft goes through and hooks into the gearbox. So we're going to have to pull it completely out this time, which is not a big deal. We've got the hood off of it right now, so we need to finish taking all of this off, undo the wiring, the oil line over there, the choke, battery cable, and the bolts holding that in. Take the steering wheel off and we can slide this whole assembly up. And then we'll start pulling the gearbox apart again. Get to that top bearing. Well, I've got bearings for both the top and the bottom of that main shaft. Okay, I took the two bolts out here on either side of the column. The one was holding my negative battery cable, so I got the battery disconnected, it's out of the way. Next, I'll take the wires off the ammeter, keep track of where they were at, and then I will remove the, undo the ignition switch and set it back out of the way. That'll get all the wiring back out of the way. Next up's your oil line. I'll just disconnect it there. And I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it from this block down here so it's not sticking up in the way. Next up is your choke. The rods have a spring-loaded ball end, so you just snap it off the carburetor. And I just slid that back up like that. I think the only way to get that rod out of there would be unscrew the knob. And I'm not thinking it's going to come off, so it's fine the way it is. And then I snap the throttle linkage off of here. And then we need to undo this little spring. And that will have that completely disconnected. Next up was the steering wheel. And if yours hasn't been off for a while, it may be a pain because it's got a tapered spline there. Take the nut and the washer off. A lot of times you can just set it in the saddle, grab both sides of the wheel, wiggle it and pull, and it'll come off. And that's how I took this one off, because I had just put it on a couple days ago. The original one I had to go through and I had to hammer up on the spokes a little bit to get it loosened up. Then it came off too. And now, if your tractor has this little bleed hole here, take that screw out so it can slide up over the top of that. And then we have a bolt here on each side. Take those out and I think it should slide up and off there. Okay, I think this assembly is ready to come off. The only thing holding it is this rubber seal there. There's a lot of crap down in there. Good thing I took this off. Now time for a little cleanup. Next up, we're going to pull off the pitman arms. Take the nut off here and then use a pitman arm puller. Pull them off. Do not use a wedge in between here because you'll break the adjuster on the other side. But these shouldn't be too bad because I had them off the other day, but when I was getting the originals off, it was a major pain. Just about destroyed a puller, using heat, using a hammer. Yeah, they did not want to come off, but they finally gave in. You will need to be able to fit your puller down in like that, and if you don't have enough room, loosen up your sectors. They do mesh together at an angle, so the middle one, you can see over here, I'm moving it in and out. So move this one out, which closes up the gap there. And then you can take this one and push it in and see how now we've got plenty of gap. So let's get the puller on it. And since these have been pulled off just the other day, they're coming right off no problem. So take both pitman arms off, and then we'll take the sector shafts out. Now I've taken the 4 bolts out to hold the sector shaft caps in. You can use the screw adjuster to pull the cap out, or you can just gently tap on that. It'll take the whole thing out. And since I had filled mine up with oil the other day, it's full of oil. So I got a drain pan under there to catch that. Believe it or not, with the old leather seals in here that had been leaking, that thing was still half full of oil after 70 years. So it hadn't done too bad. We'll take both of those out, then we can take the top off and take the shaft out. Right. Both sides are out now. Like I said, I'd put new seals in, so everything there is good. I had checked the bushings. They were nice and tight, so I did not replace those. But my play is right here. I don't know if you can see that gear moving in there, but definitely see it up here. I'd say that top bearing that usually is out of the oil is what's bad. But we'll pull it apart and see if we need to change both. So we take these 4 bolts out here, and I can take this off. I had a couple of whacks up on the top with a rubber mallet, and the column slid off. It's sitting there. It also has a bearing in here that we will be replacing. And there is the stack of shims that go in between that set the preload on this, on the bearings. And that bearing looks kind of sad in there. So we'll pull this out, head to the workbench. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take this whole gear case, or this whole steering box assembly off the tractor, which is 4 bolts, so I can drain the oil out of it, clean it, get the lower bearing race put in, have it all just brand new. No reason to half-ass it now. Over on this side, this tractor's got this foot throttle assembly. It's kind of worn out there. I was looking at it, the way it's set up, it looks like I can just swap this linkage here, which is probably the original linkage, back onto the hand throttle and be good, and I can just eliminate all this crap. And I never really used it when I was running the tractor, and it's just more stuff in the way. And it's dirty, and like I said, it's kind of worn out, so we'll just take that off and get rid of it. Well, we'll definitely be taking the foot throttle assembly off. Apparently this assembly has been broken in the past and brazed together, and just as soon as I turned on that bolt, it just snapped and fell down. So we'll get rid of all of this stuff, get it out of the way, clean the tractor up a little more. Okay, down in that hole was the lower bearing race and a freeze plug. Knock them out. Through the hole in the bottom right there. The easiest way I found to get the race out, because it's kind of there's a major corner trying to get around to get it with a punch, was I just welded the freeze plug to the race and then knocked it out. So now we need to put new race and freeze plug in the bottom. Okay, we're going to put the new bearing on the end of the ball nut assembly here. You take the new bearing, set it on like so, and there is a little retainer cup. It goes like that. And then this retainer pin that you knock in the end there to hold that together. That way the bearing won't fall off when you're trying to stick it down in the gearbox. And just like so, that's ready to go down in the new race that we put in the gearbox. Okay, center your ball nut about in the middle. aim the teeth toward the back of the gearbox. You can set this on down in. Okay, that's in like it should be. Now we'll move on to the collar, the shaft on top, because it's what holds the race for the upper bearing. Okay, this race that fit right in there came out pretty easy. As you can see, that baby is really pitted. Because well, it came out easy because I just took a steel rod, went in from this end, and there was enough of a lip you can just tap it out. What happens is this one, if you have a leak, it ends up out of the oil. Because generally you fill these up to the top of the box here. And see, there's the new bearing on there. It's just barely in the oil anyway. And then if you leak any out, it's completely out of the oil. Remember, this bolt hole on this side goes to an oil filler there. So you can, if you have any leak out, you can fill it back up through there. Now, actually, the other day when I was pumping it through, I had a hose that fit in there solid, and I pumped it up till there was oil coming out of here. So everything would have been in the oil, and it would keep this from wearing out like it did. So we'll drive the new bearing in here as soon as I clean this up a little more. Then we can put some shims in between the two, bolt it together, and check the end play. Okay, I slid the housing down on there, pushed the bearings together, and there's a pretty good gap. So I just did a quick estimate with a feeler gauge. It's around 60 thousandths. So that's where I'm going to start with the shims, because I want to end up with about 6 to 10 thousandths of vertical play when we're done. So I'll pick out 60 thousandths worth of shims, put them in there, bolt it together, and then check the play. Okay, 47 thousandths was the sweet spot on the shims to get the, it's like about 8 thousandths up here now. Everything still turns nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt this back onto the tractor because it's just as easy for me to put the sector shafts in with it bolted on the tractor. All right, we're ready to put the sector shaft back in. That's bolted back down onto the tractor. This sector shaft has teeth on both sides. You want to put the side with the least amount of teeth toward the ball nut. So it's got 4 teeth. You got 4 here. This middle one goes in the middle of the ball nut teeth. There we go. Okay. Now you take your adjuster, put it in the middle of the slot there. Bring this into place. And you start screwing that screwing that adjuster back in to this cover. Get it on there. And shove the cover up. Okay. Those teeth are tapered, so you gotta have it back far enough that the tapers will engage. You have a little O-ring. A washer and a nut. On that. Go ahead and put the bolts in over here. and tighten them up. Yeah, the side's the same. I'm just not going to be able to film it because the sun will be in the way. You've got a dot here on this tooth, and on the in the gearbox, when you look in there, you have dots on two different teeth side by side, and you put this one in between the other two dots. Otherwise, it's just the same. That just centers this up in relation to the other gear. Okay, you screw your sector bolt adjuster in to take out the backlash. Get it to where you don't have any slop. Do this one first because this one's hooked to the ball nut. Get it to where there's no slop. Back it off a little bit. You don't want it too tight. And then you can adjust this one to mesh with the one in the middle. Get it to where you get the slack out of it. I'll adjust them a little more once I get it full of oil and the steering actually hooked up, the control arms. That way I can watch those a little easier. And now we can lift this bag off. I'm be ready to fill that cavity up to the top with 80-90 gear oil. As you can see, when you fill that up like that, that top bearing is barely getting any oil. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt it all back together, and I'll fill it the rest of the way up with that filler hole on the side. Okay, cowling's bolted back on, and instead of back feeding oil up through that filler plug, I'm just going to pour some right down the shaft because we don't have this upper bearing in yet. Because that runs right down in there on top of that bearing, the top bearing in the gearbox. We'll get that filled up. Then I'm going to work on my throttle and choke, getting that hooked back up, and the oil line and the wiring. Then we can put the cowling and the steering wheel back on. Okay, the last piece is the little steering bearing thing. Which if I'd have known how it was built, I'd have just made a little bushing to go in there. Slip it in. Socket on the inside. Tap it down. There is a spring seat that drops in there. And a spring. Spring seat didn't fit. Hell with it. Like I said, that little bearing up top's a piece of crap. I'll use a bushing next time. Little felt washer. Then the wheel goes on. Lock washer, and where the hell did the nut go? Well, it's all back together, but it's still not a total success. It's still got some play. Better than it was. You can still see some vertical movement there. Now I know that shaft is how it's set up, supposed to be in between the bearings. The bearings are good now, so it's got to be the ball nut. And I'm not buying a new sector shaft just to, or a new ball nut shaft just to fix a little bit of play. It is an old tractor. I've got it as good as I can get it, and that's how I'm going to leave it. Thanks for watching.